Lieutenant Marcus Reed had supervised terraforming operations on 6 different worlds, but none of them had prepared him for the diplomatic complexity of hosting Queen Lyralii Velthera on New Haven Colony. The Nixai Empire's decision to send their actual ruler to oversee a frontier terraforming project was unprecedented enough to send shockwaves through both human and alien diplomatic circles, creating a situation where Marcus found himself responsible for keeping the galaxy's most reclusive royal alive while ensuring that 2 incompatible terraforming technologies didn't accidentally poison an entire planet. "Just remember," said Commander Sarah Blake during Marcus's briefing, "she's not just any Nixai noble. Queen Lyralii rules an empire that spans 47 star systems and has maintained strict isolationist policies for 3 centuries. Her presence here means either this terraforming project is incredibly important to them, or something else is going on that we don't understand." Marcus nodded, reviewing the technical specifications for the joint human-Nixai atmospheric processors that would transform New Haven from a marginal world into a garden suitable for both species. "What's my primary responsibility? Keep her safe, keep her happy, or keep the technology working?" "All 3, Blake replied grimly. "But if you have to choose, keep the technology working. The ecological balance we're creating here is more delicate than anything we've attempted before. One major mistake could turn this world into a toxic wasteland for the next 1,000 years." The New Haven colony operated under frontier conditions that were a far cry from the elaborate protocols normally associated with royal visits. Temporary structures housed the terraforming teams, shared facilities served both human and alien specialists, and the accommodations were functional rather than luxurious. Marcus had been assigned to the largest of the available prefab shelters, both because of his senior engineering status and because someone had decided that housing the senior human technical officer near the Queen's compound would facilitate coordination. Queen Lyralii's arrival was everything Marcus had expected and nothing like what he'd anticipated. The Nixai ruler was exactly as imposing as her reputation suggested, tall and elegant with the characteristic pointed ears that marked her species, silver-streaked dark hair that spoke of both youth and authority, and amber eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they encountered with scientific precision. But what surprised Marcus was her immediate interest in the technical aspects of the terraforming operation rather than the diplomatic ceremonies that her staff had prepared. "The atmospheric composition targets seem ambitious," she said during their first project meeting, studying holographic displays that showed the complex chemical interactions required to make New Haven's air breathable for both species. "Your models assume that our biocatalysts will integrate smoothly with your mineral processing systems, but have you tested for quantum interference between the technologies?" Marcus blinked, realizing that Queen Lyralii wasn't asking polite questions to show interest. She was identifying potential problems that his own team had missed. Quantum interference. The theoretical models suggested minimal cross-system effects. Theoretical models rarely account for the resonance patterns that Nixai biotechnology creates in planetary magnetic fields, the Queen replied, manipulating the holographic displays with obvious familiarity. "If your mineral processors operate on similar frequencies, we could see feedback loops that disrupt both systems." The observation led to 3 hours of intensive technical discussion that revealed Queen Lyralii's expertise in xenobotany and planetary ecology. She wasn't just a ceremonial ruler making a diplomatic appearance, she was a trained scientist whose understanding of terraforming technology exceeded that of most specialists Marcus had worked with. "Your Majesty," he said as they reviewed compatibility matrices for the integration systems, "your technical background is extensive." "I studied xenobotany before assuming the throne," she replied with what might have been amusement. "My advisors consider it an eccentric hobby, but I've found that understanding how living systems work helps with understanding how political systems work." Marcus watched Queen Lyralii manipulate complex ecological models with the same precision he'd seen her apply to diplomatic interactions earlier that day. But he also noticed signs of exhaustion that suggested she was carrying more responsibility than anyone realized, subtle tension around her eyes, careful control of her movements that spoke of someone pushing through fatigue, and occasional moments of distraction that indicated her attention was being pulled in multiple directions simultaneously. "The integration testing will take several days," Marcus said, reviewing the work schedule. "We'll need to monitor atmospheric chemistry, soil biology, and ecosystem balance in real time to ensure compatibility. "I'll be working with you throughout the process," Queen Lyralii said matter-of-factly. "Your Majesty, that level of involvement isn't necessary. I'm sure your time is valuable for other." "Lieutenant Reed," she interrupted gently, "this terraforming project represents the first major cooperation between humans and the Nixai Empire. If it fails, it will probably be the last. My time is most valuable when it's spent ensuring success." Over the following days, Marcus discovered that Queen Lyralii's commitment to the project went far beyond diplomatic oversight. She worked 18-hour days alongside the technical teams, contributed insights that solved problems none of them had anticipated, and demonstrated an understanding of both human and Nixai technologies that made her invaluable for the complex integration work. But he also noticed that despite being surrounded by advisors, security personnel, and diplomatic staff, the Queen seemed increasingly isolated. Her own people treated her with the kind of formal deference that maintained respectful distance, while the human team was too intimidated by her royal status to engage in the casual conversations that made frontier work bearable. "Doesn't she have anyone she can just talk to?" Marcus asked Dr. Elena Martinez, the project's xenobiology specialist, during a break between atmospheric tests. "She's a queen," Martinez replied as if that explained everything. "I don't think casual conversation is part of the job description." Marcus watched Queen Lyralii reviewing data alone in the command center, her advisors maintaining respectful distance while she made decisions that would affect the future of an entire world. For someone whose technical expertise and dedication had earned his complete professional respect, she appeared remarkably lonely. "Dr. Martinez," he said thoughtfully, "what do you know about Nixai social customs? Specifically, how they handle personal relationships versus official responsibilities?" "Very little," Martinez admitted. "The Nixai are notoriously private about their cultural practices." "Why?" Marcus looked back toward the command center, where Queen Lyralii continued working while surrounded by people who served her but didn't seem to connect with her on any personal level. "Just wondering if ruling an empire means never having normal human, or alien, contact." "Probably," Martinez said. "Though it makes you wonder what kind of person chooses to carry that much responsibility alone." The question would prove more significant than Marcus realized, as the complexities of the terraforming project were about to be overshadowed by much more dangerous complications. The first sign of serious trouble came during the third week of integration testing, when the atmospheric processors began producing oxygen readings that fluctuated wildly despite stable input parameters. Marcus discovered the problem during his routine morning system checks. Someone had introduced microfractures into the crystalline components that regulated gas exchange between the human and Nixai biotechnology systems. "This isn't equipment failure," he told Commander Blake over the emergency communication link. "The damage patterns are too precise, too targeted. Someone who understands both technologies did this deliberately." "Sabotage?" Blake's voice carried the kind of controlled tension that suggested she'd been expecting this possibility. "Any indication of who might be responsible?" Marcus studied the damaged components through his diagnostic scanner, noting that the sabotage required intimate knowledge of both human engineering and Nixai biotechnology. It would have to be someone with access to both technical databases and the physical systems. That limits the suspect pool considerably. "To people on your team," Blake said grimly. "Or Queen Lyralii's technical advisors," Marcus added, though the possibility made him uncomfortable. "The Nixai delegation includes specialists who understand our systems well enough to identify vulnerabilities." The sabotage investigation revealed a more complex situation than simple equipment damage. Intelligence analysis suggested that extremist factions from both species opposed the terraforming cooperation, human groups that viewed it as alien infiltration disguised as partnership, and Nixai traditionalists who considered any cooperation with other species a betrayal of their empire's isolationist principles. "The political implications are significant," Queen Lyralii said during an emergency planning session that included only Marcus, Commander Blake, and the Queen's chief security advisor. "If this project fails due to sabotage, both our peoples will blame each other rather than the extremists who actually caused the problems. Which is probably exactly what the saboteurs want, Marcus observed. Failure here doesn't just doom New Haven colony, it probably ends any chance of human-Xi cooperation for the next century. Queen Lyraliai's expression grew determined in a way that reminded Marcus why she'd been able to maintain her empire's independence despite pressure from much larger galactic powers. Then we ensure that the project succeeds, regardless of the opposition it faces. Your Majesty, said Captain Velnix, her chief security advisor, the safest course would be to evacuate you to orbit until the sabotage investigation is complete. Your presence here makes you a target for anyone who wants to escalate this situation into an interspecies incident. My departure would signal weakness and would probably convince moderate factions in both governments that cooperation is too dangerous to pursue, Queen Lyralii replied firmly. I'm staying. Marcus found himself assigned to emergency security protocols that required him to maintain closer proximity to the Queen during the ongoing investigation. The arrangement was practical. As the senior human technical officer, he needed to coordinate with her on system repairs, and as someone who understood both technologies, he could identify additional sabotage attempts, but it also led to conversations that went far beyond their usual discussions of atmospheric chemistry and soil biology. Lieutenant Reed, Queen Lyralii said during one of their late-night system monitoring sessions, "May I ask you something personal?" "Of course, Your Majesty." "Do you enjoy this kind of work? The isolation, the frontier conditions, the constant technical challenges?" She gestured around the command center, where holographic displays showed the planet's slowly stabilizing ecosystem. "It must be very different from life on more established worlds." Marcus considered the question while checking readings from the atmospheric sensors. "I like building things that will last," he said finally. "Terraforming isn't just about making a world habitable for one generation, it's about creating something that will support entire civilizations for centuries. There's something satisfying about work that has that kind of permanence. Even when that work requires sacrifice of more immediate comforts." "Especially then," Marcus replied. "The best things usually require some sacrifice." Queen Lyralii nodded thoughtfully. "I chose to personally oversee this project because I believe my people's future depends on learning to work with other species rather than maintaining the isolation that has traditionally protected us." "That's a significant philosophical shift for the Nixai Empire," Marcus observed. "It's a shift that has created considerable political opposition within my own government," the Queen admitted. "Many of my advisors consider cooperation with humans a dangerous precedent that could compromise our cultural independence." Marcus glanced at her, noting the strain in her expression. "But you're pursuing it anyway." "Because isolation isn't protection, it's stagnation," Queen Lyralii said with conviction. "The galaxy is changing, Lieutenant Reed. Species that refuse to adapt to new realities don't survive as independent civilizations. They become either extinct or absorbed by more flexible powers." The conversation revealed layers of complexity behind the Queen's decision to come to New Haven that Marcus hadn't previously understood. This wasn't just a terraforming project for her. It was a test case for her vision of the Nixai Empire's future, with political ramifications that could determine whether her people thrived or slowly declined into irrelevance. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "what happens if this project fails?" "Politically, I mean." "It won't fail," she replied with quiet determination. "Too much depends on it." "But if it did?" Queen Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes reflecting the glow of the monitoring displays. "If it failed, particularly if it failed due to sabotage or incompetence, it would probably end my reign and return the Nixai Empire to the isolationist policies that have defined us for centuries." Marcus felt the weight of her confession settling over him. Queen Lyralii wasn't just risking the terraforming project, she was risking everything she'd worked for, betting her political future on the possibility that cooperation between species could produce better results than traditional independence. "That's a significant gamble," he said. "The most important decisions usually are," she replied. "Though I should mention that having competent partners makes the risk more manageable." partners? You, Lieutenant Reed. Your technical expertise, your dedication to the project's success, your willingness to work with rather than around Nix high technology. Queen Lyralii met his eyes with an expression that carried both professional respect and something more personal. I couldn't do this alone. Marcus realized that somewhere between technical discussions and crisis management, his professional relationship with Queen Lyralii had evolved into something closer to partnership. She wasn't just a royal figurehead overseeing his work, she was a colleague whose expertise complemented his own, whose commitment to success matched his dedication to quality, and whose presence had made the challenging project more rewarding than any terraforming operation he'd previously undertaken. What he didn't fully understand was how isolated Queen Lyralii felt despite being surrounded by people whose job was to serve her, or how much his straightforward professional respect meant to someone who rarely encountered interactions that weren't filtered through political calculation. The sabotage attempts escalated during the fourth week when someone introduced a bioengineered pathogen into the soil cultivation systems, creating a chain reaction that threatened to destroy 3 months of careful ecosystem development. Marcus found himself working around the clock with Queen Lyralii to identify the contamination source and develop countermeasures before the damage became irreversible. The pathogen is specifically designed to target the symbiotic relationship between human mineral processors and Nix-high biocatalysts, Queen Lyralii explained, manipulating holographic models that showed the contamination spreading through the planet's developing soil matrix. Whoever created this understands both technologies well enough to weaponize their interaction. Which brings us back to the inside saboteur theory, Marcus said grimly, running diagnostics on the affected cultivation zones. Someone with access to both technical databases and the physical systems. They worked through the night developing a treatment protocol that combined human nanotechnology with Nix-high biological remediation techniques. The process required constant monitoring and real-time adjustments, keeping both of them in the command center while their respective teams implemented the emergency procedures across the colony. Marcus, Queen Lyralii said during a brief break in the crisis management, using his first name for the first time since they'd met, "May I ask you something that's not directly related to our current emergency?" "Of course," he replied, noting that her use of his given name felt natural rather than presumptuous. "What made you choose terraforming as a career?" "The technical challenges are enormous, the working conditions are often harsh, and the projects take years to complete. Surely someone with your skills could find more comfortable positions elsewhere." Marcus considered the question while monitoring the pathogen treatment progress on his displays. "My father was a colony engineer on Kepler 7b, he said finally. "I grew up watching him build infrastructure that transformed a marginal world into something that could support millions of people. There was something about that scale of achievement, creating something that would outlast you and benefit people you'd never meet, that seemed worth dedicating a life to. And you've never regretted choosing such demanding work?" "Not the work itself," Marcus said honestly. "Though I sometimes wonder what it would be like to have relationships that weren't complicated by deployment schedules and frontier isolation." Queen Lyralii's expression grew thoughtful. "Isolation can be a problem regardless of one's profession. Your Majesty. Ruling requires constant attention to political implications of every decision, every relationship, every casual interaction," she explained. "After 15 years on the throne, I've discovered that having people whose job is to serve you isn't the same as having people who genuinely care about your welfare." Marcus looked at her, noting the weariness that she usually kept hidden behind royal composure. "That sounds lonely." "It is," she admitted simply. "Though this project has been different. Working with someone who treats me as a colleague rather than as a political asset has been refreshing. The pathogen treatment proved successful, but the process required 72 hours of continuous monitoring to ensure that the countermeasures didn't create secondary ecological problems." Marcus and Queen Lyralii took shifts sleeping in the command center, maintaining the vigilance needed to prevent additional sabotage while keeping the planet's developing ecosystem stable. "The soil chemistry is returning to normal parameters," Queen Lyralii reported during her monitoring shift, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who'd been operating on minimal sleep for days. But we'll need to maintain observation protocols for at least another week to ensure the pathogen is completely eliminated. Agreed, Marcus said, reviewing the biological analysis data from his own workstation. Though I'm starting to think the saboteurs' real goal isn't just to destroy the terraforming project, they want to exhaust us into making mistakes that they can exploit. Sleep deprivation as a weapon, the Queen mused. Clever, if ethically questionable. They continued working through the crisis, but Marcus noticed that Queen Lyralii was pushing herself beyond reasonable limits. Her dedication to the project's success was driving her to maintain a schedule that would have challenged someone half her age, and her refusal to delegate critical decisions was creating a bottleneck that slowed response times during emergencies. Your Majesty, he said during one of their brief meal breaks, when did you last get a full night's sleep? Sleep is a luxury during crisis management, she replied, though her exhaustion was becoming obvious despite her attempts to maintain alert composure. Sleep is a necessity for maintaining decision-making capacity, Marcus corrected gently. You've been carrying the primary responsibility for this project's success for weeks. At some point, exhaustion becomes a liability rather than evidence of dedication. Queen Lyralii studied him with an expression that suggested she was evaluating whether his concern was professional or personal. Lieutenant Reed, are you suggesting that I'm not capable of managing my own responsibilities? I'm suggesting that even queens are human, or Nix High equivalent, and that the project's success depends on your continued effectiveness, which requires adequate rest, Marcus replied directly. And if something goes wrong while I'm sleeping? If the saboteurs launch another attack while I'm not monitoring the systems? Then I'll wake you up, Marcus said simply. Your Majesty, you've been training me to understand both technologies for weeks. I'm capable of handling routine monitoring while you get the rest you need to maintain peak performance during actual emergencies. Queen Lyralii looked around the command center, at the displays showing New Haven's slowly stabilizing ecosystem and the evidence of their successful response to multiple sabotage attempts. You would do that? Take responsibility for monitoring systems that could affect the future of both our peoples. I've been doing exactly that, Marcus pointed out. The only difference would be letting you sleep while I do it. For the first time since the crisis began, Queen Lyralii smiled with something approaching genuine warmth rather than diplomatic courtesy. Very well, Lieutenant Reed. But if anything unusual happens, I'll wake you immediately, Marcus promised. What neither of them anticipated was how the combination of exhaustion, stress, and growing personal trust would lead to a situation that challenged every protocol they'd been following since her arrival on New Haven Colony. The final crisis arrived without warning at 0347 colony time, when multiple simultaneous explosions rocked the terraforming facility. Marcus woke to emergency alarms and the sound of weapons fire from the direction of the main atmospheric processing station, where someone was launching a coordinated attack designed to destroy months of ecosystem development work. All security teams, respond to perimeter breach at zones 7 through 12, Captain Velnix's voice crackled through the communication system. Unknown hostiles attempting to destroy primary atmospheric processors. Marcus rolled out of his cot and grabbed his emergency kit, but before he could reach the command center, Queen Lyralii appeared at his tent entrance. She was fully dressed and carrying portable monitoring equipment, her expression combining royal authority with scientific determination. The attack is targeting the integration points between human and Nix High technologies, she said without preamble. If they succeed in destroying those connections, we'll lose everything we've built here. Your security team will handle the attackers, Marcus replied, pulling on his work clothes. Our job is to protect the systems they're trying to destroy. The emergency command center in the main facility is compromised, Queen Lyralii explained, activating her portable displays. We'll need to coordinate the defensive response from here. Marcus realized that his tent had become the backup command post for saving the terraforming project, with the Queen of the Nix High Empire working alongside him to prevent ecological disaster while her security forces fought off whoever was trying to destroy their work. The next 6 hours were a blur of emergency system management, real-time damage assessment, and desperate improvisation to keep New Haven's developing ecosystem stable while attackers tried to introduce chaos into every critical system. Marcus and Queen Lyralii worked with synchronized efficiency, their weeks of collaboration allowing them to coordinate responses without wasting time on explanations or authorization procedures. The Western atmospheric processors are offline, Queen Lyralii reported, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. But I can reroute biological filtration through the backup systems if you can boost power to the Eastern mineral processors. Already on it, Marcus replied, redirecting energy from non-essential systems. How long can the biological filters handle the full atmospheric load? 18 hours, maybe 24 if we're lucky, she said, monitoring biological system stress indicators. After that, we'll start seeing cascade failures throughout the ecosystem. The solution that saved both the project and probably their lives came when Queen Lyralii made the decision to activate experimental I Sci Fi biotechnology that had been held in reserve for extreme emergencies. The process created a deeper symbiotic relationship between human and alien terraforming systems than had ever been attempted, requiring her to interface directly with the planet's developing biological matrix through neural connection protocols that demanded her constant attention. The integration is working, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she was partially linked to the planet's biological systems. Human technology is providing mineral and chemical-based processing, while I Sci Fi biotechnology handles organic adaptation and ecosystem balance. But the neural interface requires continuous monitoring. If I lose connection, the symbiosis will collapse. How long do you need to maintain the interface? Marcus asked, watching biointegration readings that showed New Haven's ecosystem achieving stability levels they'd never reached before. 36 hours minimum, Queen Lyralii replied, though Marcus could see that the neural connection was draining her rapidly. Possibly longer, depending on how thoroughly the attackers damaged the conventional systems. What followed was the most intense period of Marcus's terraforming career, monitoring Queen Lyralii's vital signs while she maintained neural connection with an entire planet's developing biosphere. The process required her to remain conscious and alert for far longer than any being should attempt, pushing beyond normal endurance limits to ensure that the experimental integration process didn't collapse. Your readings are approaching dangerous levels, Marcus said during the 32nd hour, watching biomonitors that showed Queen Lyralii's nervous system under stress that could cause permanent damage. The integration is almost complete, she replied, her voice showing strain but maintaining determination. Just a few more hours. But as the 36th hour approached, exhaustion finally overwhelmed even royal determination. Queen Lyralii had saved the terraforming project and probably prevented an ecological disaster that would have taken decades to repair, but the effort had pushed her beyond the limits of consciousness. Marcus, she said softly, her neural connection to the planet's systems finally stabilizing enough to allow disconnection, I can't. I need to. She collapsed where she stood, her body finally demanding the rest that duty had denied for too long. Marcus caught her as she fell, realizing that the most powerful woman in the I Sci Fi empire had literally worked herself unconscious to save their joint project. With the command center destroyed and her official quarters damaged in the attack, his tent was the closest safe location where she could recover. Too exhausted to consider protocols and too relieved by their success to worry about diplomatic complications, Marcus simply helped Queen Lyralii to his cot, where she immediately fell into the deep sleep that her body desperately needed. When he woke several hours later, Marcus found Queen Lyralii still sleeping peacefully beside him, her presence both completely natural and utterly unprecedented. She looked younger in sleep, with the stress lines that marked her waking expression smoothed away, and Marcus realized that this moment of vulnerability represented ultimate trust from someone whose position normally required constant vigilance. Your Majesty, he said softly as she began to stir. Queen Lyralii opened her amber eyes slowly, taking in her surroundings with the careful awareness of someone trained to assess threats upon waking. When she realized where she was, her expression shifted through surprise, consideration, and what might have been amusement. Lieutenant Reed, she said calmly, I appear to have imposed upon your hospitality. Your Majesty, you saved the entire terraforming project, Marcus replied. I think extraordinary circumstances justify extraordinary accommodations. Indeed, she agreed, sitting up slowly and checking her portable displays to confirm that New Haven's ecosystem remains stable. Though I suspect my security team and your diplomatic corps will have questions about the unconventional nature of these accommodations. As if summoned by her words, voices outside the tent indicated that the missing queen had been located by people who were very interested in understanding the current situation. Your Majesty, came Captain Velnix's voice, carefully controlled but clearly concerned, we've been searching for you since dawn. I'm quite safe, Captain, Queen Lyralii replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having her decisions accepted without question. Lieutenant Reed and I have been monitoring the final integration phases of the emergency biotechnology deployment. In his personal quarters, Your Majesty. Queen Lyralii stood and moved to the tent entrance, where Marcus could see her security team, several human officers, and what appeared to be most of both delegations gathering to witness whatever explanation their leaders might provide. Captain Velnix, she said with the kind of calm authority that suggested she prepared for this moment, Lieutenant Reed's quarters served as our emergency command center during the crisis. When the integration process was complete and rest became necessary, I remained here according to royal tradition. Royal tradition, Your Majesty. Captain Velnix's tone suggested this was the first he'd heard of any such tradition. The tradition, Queen Lyralii said with perfect composure, of remaining close to one's most trusted advisor during times of crisis. Lieutenant Reed has proven himself invaluable to both the success of this project and the security of the realm. It is entirely appropriate that he serve in such capacity. Marcus watched as both human and Nixai officials processed this explanation, clearly trying to determine whether they were witnessing actual royal protocol or an improvised justification for an unprecedented situation. I see, Captain Velnix said finally. And this tradition extends to whatever arrangements best serve the needs of the Empire, Queen Lyralii replied firmly. Lieutenant Reed will continue to serve as my primary technical advisor and liaison with human terraforming operations. His quarters will remain available for any future collaboration requirements. The gathering dispersed with the kind of careful neutrality that suggested everyone was choosing to accept the official explanation while privately forming their own conclusions about what they'd witnessed. Royal tradition. Marcus asked quietly when they were alone again. Queen Lyralii smiled with the first genuinely relaxed expression he'd seen from her since her arrival on New Haven. As of this morning, it is indeed a royal tradition. The Queen has the authority to establish new customs when circumstances warrant them. And what circumstances warrant a tradition of sleeping in advisors' quarters? The circumstances, she said, settling back onto his cot with obvious comfort, of finding someone trustworthy enough to be vulnerable around. Do you have any idea how rare that is for someone in my position? Marcus studied her expression, understanding that Queen Lyralii's claim about royal tradition was both diplomatic cover and genuine truth. She had indeed established a new precedent, trusting someone completely enough to seek comfort in their presence rather than maintaining the isolation that royal protocol normally required. Your Majesty, he said carefully, won't your advisors question this new tradition? My advisors will adapt to whatever traditions I establish, she replied with quiet confidence. Besides, the success of this terraforming project has proven that human-Nixai cooperation can achieve results that neither species could accomplish alone. It would be foolish not to continue such productive collaboration. And the cooperation requires. The cooperation requires, Queen Lyralii said with obvious amusement, that I maintain close working relationships with the humans who have proven themselves most capable and trustworthy. Starting with the engineer who helped save an entire world and who was considerate enough to let me sleep when exhaustion finally overcame duty. Marcus realized that Queen Lyralii had accomplished something remarkable. She had transformed an unprecedented breach of protocol into official policy, creating a framework that would allow her to continue the personal connection that had made their professional collaboration so effective. Your Majesty, he said, are you saying that this new tradition involves This new tradition involves, she interrupted gently, the Queen maintaining appropriate proximity to her most valued advisors during important projects. Which means, Lieutenant Reed, that your tent has become an extension of the royal quarters for the duration of our work together. And after the terraforming project is complete? Queen Lyraliai's smile became more personal, less royal, and entirely genuine. After this project is complete, I suspect there will be other cooperative ventures that require close collaboration between our peoples. Someone will need to serve as permanent liaison between human terraforming operations and Nixai biotechnology development. Marcus felt the pieces falling into place. A permanent position. A permanent position based on Nixai Prime, working directly with the Crown on long-term strategic planning for interspecies cooperation, she confirmed. Assuming, of course, that the person selected for such a position would be comfortable with the proximity requirements that royal traditions might entail. Marcus looked around his simple tent, then at the queen of the most powerful empire in the sector, who was suggesting that his frontier accommodations might become a regular arrangement for someone whose friendship and trust she valued more than diplomatic protocol. Your Majesty, he said slowly, I think I could adapt to any traditions that serve the greater good of interspecies cooperation. Excellent, Queen Lyraliai said, lying back down on his cot with obvious satisfaction. In that case, this tradition begins immediately. I find that I sleep much better when I'm near someone I trust completely. And if people ask questions about the Queen sleeping in her advisor's quarters? They can direct those questions to me, she replied firmly. I am perfectly capable of defending my own decisions, especially when those decisions have proven as successful as our collaboration has been. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Royal Palace on Nixai Prime, watching ships from dozens of species arrive for the dedication ceremony of New Haven Colony. The terraforming project had become the model for interspecies cooperation that Queen Lyraliai had envisioned, with multiple worlds now requesting similar joint development programs. The Altarian delegation is particularly interested in our integration protocols, Queen Lyraliai said, joining him at the observation windows. They're hoping to adapt our techniques for their own terraforming efforts in the Rigel system. Are we ready to share those techniques? Marcus asked, reviewing the technical documentation they prepared for the ceremony. We're ready to share everything that made this project successful, she replied, settling beside him with the casual comfort that had characterized their relationship since that first night when exhaustion had overcome protocol. Including the organizational structures that made effective collaboration possible. Marcus smiled, understanding that Queen Lyraliai was referring to more than just technical procedures. The royal tradition she'd established on New Haven had indeed become official policy, with Marcus serving as the permanent human liaison to the Nixai Crown and maintaining quarters adjacent to the royal palace. Your advisors have adapted remarkably well to the new traditions, he observed. My advisors have discovered that the Queen is more effective when she has personal relationships that provide emotional support separate from political necessity, Queen Lyraliai replied. Even Captain Velnix admits that proximity to trusted advisors has improved security rather than compromising it. And the other galactic powers? Any concerns about human influence on Nixai policy? The other galactic powers have noticed that human-Nixai cooperation produces results that benefit everyone involved, she said pragmatically. Success tends to silence critics more effectively than explanations. Marcus looked out at the ships arriving for the ceremony, representatives from civilizations that had initially been skeptical of cooperation between humans and the reclusive Nixai Empire. The terraforming project had proven that such cooperation was not only possible but could achieve things that neither species could accomplish alone. Your Majesty, he said, do you ever regret establishing this particular royal tradition? Queen Lyraliai turned to study him with amber eyes that held warmth, amusement, and something deeper that had grown between them over months of shared work and mutual trust. Marcus, she said, using his first name as she had since that morning when she'd awakened in his tent, I've discovered that the best traditions are the ones that serve both official responsibilities and personal happiness. This tradition accomplishes both. Even though it started as diplomatic improvisation. Especially because it started as diplomatic improvisation, she corrected with a smile. The most important decisions are often the ones that feel right even when they challenge established protocols. As the dedication ceremony began, Marcus reflected that Queen Lyralii had indeed created a new royal tradition. One that recognized that even rulers needed personal connections that transcended political utility, and that the strongest foundations for interspecies cooperation were built on genuine trust between individuals who cared about each other's welfare as much as their civilization's success. The tradition had begun with exhaustion and necessity, but it had grown into something that neither protocols nor politics could have created, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and the simple recognition that sometimes the most important breakthroughs happened when people chose to trust each other completely.